Human rights lawyer Dele Farotimi gained massive support in court with new updates from his lawyers. This news update sheds light on the controversy surrounding human rights activist Dele Farotimi, his legal challenges, and the broader societal implications of his situation. The case against Dele Farotimi is portrayed as an attempt to suppress free speech rather than a pursuit of justice, underlining concerns about the misuse of state power to silence dissenting voices. The lawyers contrasts the treatment of Dele Farotimi, a vocal advocate for justice, with the leniency afforded to individuals implicated in significant financial crimes. This comparison underscores the perceived inequality within Nigeria's justice system. The lawyers emphasizes the importance of collective support for Dele Farotimi, portraying him as a symbol of resistance against oppression and corruption. References to corruption and the mismanagement of resources highlight systemic issues, calling for accountability among those in power. They urge citizens to rise against injustice, suggesting that Dele Farotimi's struggle is emblematic of the broader fight for equity and accountability in Nigeria. This case not only focuses on the immediate legal battle, but also serves as a lens through which larger societal and institutional challenges in Nigeria are examined. It all began like any other day in Lagos, Nigeria, a bustling city where the vibrant pulse of life mingles with the frustrations of its citizens. On this particular morning, however, something extraordinary was happening. Dele Farotimi, a name that has become synonymous with courage and advocacy for human rights, was at the center of a whirlwind of events. Dele Farotimi was no stranger to controversy. A lawyer by profession and a fighter for justice by passion, Dele Farotimi had made it his mission to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. His boldness had earned him admirers and enemies alike. As the sun rose over Lagos, a dramatic series of events unfolded. It was not the sort of drama anyone expected for a lawyer whose only crime was speaking out against the powerful. Dele Farotimi, clad in his characteristic humility, was arrested under what many would later describe as questionable circumstances. The charge? Criminal defamation, a term that sounded more ominous than it should, considering that it referred to a bailable offense. Yet the way Dele Farotimi was treated, one would think he had masterminded a grand conspiracy against the state. The scene was surreal. Heavy security surrounded him, armed officers stationed at every corner, their presence so overwhelming it was almost laughable. The question on everyone's lips was simple: why the overkill? Here was a man who had wielded nothing more than his pen and his voice, and yet the state seemed determined to portray him as a dangerous criminal. It was the sort of irony that could make you laugh if it weren't so infuriating. Dele Farotimi's arrest was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of a series of actions designed to silence him. His crime, if one could call it that, was speaking out against corruption and inequality. He had written a book, Nigeria and its Criminal Justice System, in which he pulled no punches. The book called out systemic issues, naming individuals and institutions that had, in his view, perpetuated injustice. Among those named was Afe Babalola, a respected yet controversial figure in Nigeria's legal landscape. Afe Babalola, instead of responding to the allegations in Dele Farotimi's book with facts and clarity, chose to file a defamation suit. What followed was a chain of events that seemed more like a poorly scripted drama than the workings of a justice system. Dele Farotimi was not just sued, he was hunted down, arrested, and paraded as though he were a threat to national security. The journey from Lagos to Akure, where Dele Farotimi would face trial, was another chapter in this bizarre saga. He was transported across state lines, a spectacle that felt more like an episode of a crime show than the handling of a bailable offense. By the time he arrived at the Akure Magistrate Court, the absurdity of the situation had reached its peak. The court premises were crawling with armed officers, their presence creating an atmosphere of intimidation. The charges against Dele Farotimi were clear enough on paper: criminal defamation. Yet, the implications were far from straightforward. To many Nigerians, this case was not about defamation. It was about silencing a man who had dared to speak truth to power. The real issue was not the law, but the misuse of the legal system to crush dissent. Dele Farotimi's supporters saw this for what it was, an attack on free speech. Among the voices of support was Yakubu Adeola, one of Dele Farotimi's lawyers. Yakubu Adeola spoke with a mix of frustration and determination as he addressed reporters outside the court. "This is not about justice," he said, his voice firm. "This is about silencing a man who has dared to stand up against the powerful. If those who loot our treasury can walk free, why is Dele Farotimi being treated like this?" Yakubu Adeola's words struck a chord. The disparity in how justice was administered in Nigeria had long been a sore point for many citizens. Corrupt politicians and officials who had stolen billions from the public coffers often faced little to no consequences. Yet here was Dele Farotimi, a man who had never stolen a kobo, being denied bail for a non-violent offense. The hypocrisy was glaring, and it only served to amplify the support for Dele Farotimi. The courtroom proceedings were a study in contrasts. On one side was Dele Farotimi, calm and composed despite the circumstances. On the other was a team of state actors, their determination to secure a conviction evident in their every move. The magistrate, caught in the middle, was tasked with delivering a decision that would either uphold or undermine the principles of justice. The arguments presented in court were as predictable as they were disheartening. The prosecution painted Dele Farotimi as a threat to society, a man whose words had the power to incite unrest. The defense, led by Yakubu Adeola, countered with logic and the law. Criminal defamation, they argued, was not a crime that warranted such harsh treatment. Moreover, the law was clear. Everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Despite the compelling arguments from the defense, the case dragged on. Days turned into weeks, and Dele Farotimi remained in detention. His supporters grew increasingly restless, their frustrations spilling onto the streets and social media. Hashtags demanding his release trended online, while protests erupted across the country. Dele Farotimi's name became a rallying cry for justice and accountability. As the case continued, the spotlight turned to the broader implications of Dele Farotimi's plight. This was not just about one man, it was about the state of Nigeria's justice system. The system, once seen as a beacon of hope, was now being used as a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. The case exposed deep-seated issues within the judiciary, from delays in granting bail to the selective application of the law. Dele Farotimi's story resonated with many Nigerians because it reflected their own experiences. They saw in him a man who had dared to challenge the status quo, who had spoken out against the corruption and inequality that plagued their nation. His fight became their fight, a symbol of the broader struggle for justice and equity. The case also drew international attention. Amnesty International called for his immediate release, while Human Rights Watch highlighted the case as an example of the shrinking space for free speech in Nigeria. The global spotlight put additional pressure on the Nigerian government, forcing them to defend their actions on a broader stage. In a letter smuggled out of detention and later shared by his lawyers, he wrote, "I am not afraid. The truth is on our side, and the truth cannot be silenced. This fight is bigger than me. It is about the kind of country we want to build. A country where justice is not for sale, where the law protects the weak and holds the powerful accountable." The letter struck a chord with many. It was shared widely, inspiring even more people to join the movement. Rallies were held in cities across Nigeria, from Lagos to Abuja, with supporters demanding not just Dele Farotimi's release, but also a broader reckoning with the injustices plaguing the nation. As the weeks turned into months, the case began to reach its climax. The magistrate, under immense pressure from both sides, announced that a decision would soon be made. The announcement set off a flurry of activity, with supporters of Dele Farotimi ramping up their efforts. Petitions were circulated, social media campaigns intensified, and protests grew louder. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed once again. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Dele Farotimi stood tall, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around him. When the magistrate finally delivered the verdict, the room erupted. It was a mixed decision, one that granted Dele Farotimi bail but did not dismiss the charges against him. While the decision was a partial victory, it was enough to reignite hope. Dele Farotimi's supporters celebrated outside the courthouse, their chants of "Justice for Dele" echoing through the streets. For them, this was not the end, but a new beginning, a chance to continue the fight for a better Nigeria. Dele Farotimi, now out on bail, wasted no time in resuming his advocacy. In his first public appearance after his release, he addressed a crowd of supporters, his voice unwavering. "This is not about me," he said. "This is about all of us. Together, we can build a Nigeria where justice is not a privilege but a right, where the truth is not a crime but a cornerstone of our democracy." His words were met with thunderous applause, a powerful reminder of the impact one man can have when he refuses to back down. As the crowd dispersed, one thing was clear. The fight for justice in Nigeria was far from over. But with people like Dele Farotimi leading the charge, there was hope.
In fact, most of us, we have cried in the corners of our room that what is happening to our country. Somebody like Dele Farotimi, who even on the first arrangement, should be given granted bail on self-recognition. Because number one, the crime against him is not even a weighty one.
Comrade, solidarity. Comrade.
Wait, you can't push me. Why are you pushing me?
Revolution! Nothing shall discourage us.
My name is Yakubu Arowoshola Eleto. I'm a legal practitioner, human rights activist, and the convener of Lagos Advocacy Group.
Alright, so can you tell us who you are representing in court today?
Well, I am one of the counsels for Mr. Dele Farotimi, a human rights activist and a dogged social crusader.
For the benefit of those who are not aware, what exactly is the case against Mr. Dele Farotimi today?
Well, the case against Mr. Dele Farotimi is a case of criminal defamation that I brought him from. He was abducted from Lagos and brought to Ekiti on the instruction and instigation of Chief Are Afe Babalola and his entire law firm. Was the one who ordered the whisking of Mr. Dele Farotimi in a commando manner in his law firm in Chevron Drive in Lagos down to Ekiti. He was moved from Lagos. He passed through Ogun State. He passed through Oyo State. He passed through Osun State. He passed through Ondo State before he's finally dumped here in Ekiti State. And to our surprise, criminal defamation that we know that in our law as of today is a bailable offense. Since then, he has been in detention. The magistrate and the coup plotters have said they have been looking for him, that he jumped bail, that they have issued a bench warrant against him, and they are trying to enforce that bench warrant. And because of that, they feel that releasing him on bail is going to be a threat to the society. That is why he has been in detention for more than 3 weeks now, which I think it is not healthy. But light a lie, it is not healthy for our judiciary.
All right, sir, before we let you go, what are your expectations from today's proceedings?
Well, I don't expect anything because the matter on ground is not even Afe Babalola. Afe Babalola is the one fronting as if he's the one, but we know that it's a fight between the state and Mr. Dele Farotimi. And the reasons are very clear. The reason why the state is fighting Dele Farotimi is because he has been consistent in championing the cause of the oppressed in this country. Because we begin to ask questions. If people who have looted the treasuries of this country are granted bail, if people who have even committed crime against humanity are granted bail, what are we now going to say of an individual who just wrote a book that does not have any criminal record, that has not been indicted by any court in this country, will be denied bail? I don't know any sinner. Of course, the law is very clear. Although the magistrate or any judge has the right to grant bail, to use his discretion either judicially or judiciously. But in using those ones, the principle of natural justice, the principle of equity, the principle of good conscience must be parameters for granting those bail. What are the reasons why Dele Farotimi has not been granted bail up till today? I still cannot fathom. In fact, most of us, we have cried in the corners of our room that what is happening to our country. Somebody like Dele Farotimi, who even on the first arrangement should be granted bail on self-recognition. Because number one, the crime against him is not even a weighty one. Even if it's a weighty one, he has a name in society to protect. And even if the court even want to go further and say that and say that he needs to bring shorty, let them grant him bail. Even the Federal High Court, the Federal High Court on the 9th granted him bail on that same day with 50 million naira out talk less of a magistrate. So this is not healthy for our judiciary. Of course, it is not healthy for our judiciary, but we believe that as for me, I am not expecting much. I'm even expecting the worst, because maybe the plan of the state actors is that this person should spend the New Year and the Christmas behind the bar. That is not right. So we are appealing that our prayer is that let him be granted bail. If there's any case against him, let him prepare for his case. Because the essence of bail itself is just that for the defendant to prepare for his defense, because everybody is presumed innocent until he is proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction.
Thank you very much, sir. Your full names again?
My names are Yakubu Arowoshola Eletu.
Thank you, sir.
Let's rewind a bit. In the book, Nigeria and its Criminal Justice System.
My name is Dele Farotimi, and I've been told to say that everything and anything I say would be the truth and nothing but the truth. I promise to do that. I'm not sure anybody serious was actually expecting anything from this administration. Those who are serious about any expectation of change did not ab initio support this administration. So I'm not sure that anyone who had genuine hopes have had their hopes dashed. This administration has done exactly what it promised to do, which is nothing. Because I would imagine that if you're serious about youth employment, one of the fastest ways to do that would be to have dealt with the scourge of insecurity, which would have enabled a whole lot of return to the rural area. But what you're seeing is an accelerated pace of rural despoliation and people moving to urban centers. That simply explains to you that the security situation is not getting any better, so you really cannot move people back towards the rural communities. Hence, you cannot move the youth into farming in any significant number. So I'm not sure. And if you even look at education, you find that the only thing that is really happening with the youth population is that they are fleeing. They are fleeing largely because of the seeming hopelessness of our situation. They are fleeing. So I'm not sure anyone who there is nobody who can really say that they genuinely expected that some miracle would happen with youth employment under this administration. Outside of the most obvious for me, which is the rule of law, which would engender confidence both of the local populace and even of those who might wish to invest in our local economy. Outside of that, I would imagine access to credit is probably the most important thing that you could give to the youth to enable them or anyone else who is desirous of creating wealth to come out of poverty. Because if the only credit available to people are credits in the 30s, you are paying 30-something% interest. What real investments can be done with such atrocious rates? The central bank own rate is in the 20s. So I would imagine that any government that is desirous of creating wealth would address the paucity of credit in the system. Because without access to credit, that is before you now begin to deal with all the other infrastructure that should be in place that are not in place, outside of the lack of the rule of law that already governs. Impunity governs our space. To now have to lay on more failures on top of that. If impunity were governing the place and you had a credible credit system, you had security, if we didn't have to deal with the multiple layers of problems that are on top of the insecurity, the lack of credit in the system, then maybe. But the way things are right now is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't deal with these sundry issues, you really cannot turn things around. Perhaps they should resign. Because if you are asking what practical steps we can take, the reality is that that's the elephant in the room. That is the elephant in the room. His very presence in the office is a violation of the sovereign will of the people. He knows it, we know it. So if he's really interested in changing anything, he should resign and put in place a credible system that is capable of superintending free and fair elections, and we will never forget him in history. But then, that's just wishful thinking, like me wishing I was a little fairer or a little taller. So
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.